California. This is Lifeguard Tower 18 right over here. Let me show you. Flip this around. That's Tower 18 right there. They just came through with the beach cleaning equipment. We had a big storm that pushed all kinds of debris up on the beach. They like to keep the sands here clean, and that's where I do my runs right to the beaches right there. And then the Huntington Beach Pier and the sunrise is right over there. And I'm here with my stuff, and we're going to sit here and read a chapter. And there's a couple of guys out there surfing already. You can see there's a guy paddling out right there. There's a guy paddling and a guy a body surfer behind him. The guy paddling just goes the wave. There goes the body surfer about to duck under. And then there's another surfer out there riding the big peaks that are coming in. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and read another chapter of my book, Going Alone. See, is that level? That's pretty level. Hold on. And this is a long chapter, so I'm going to get started. It's really cold, actually, this morning. It's really cold. So I'm going to get started. I brought along a thermos with some coffee, so I'm ready for that. And let's get going. Going Alone is a book that I wrote over a course of 3 years after I came back to America from Japan. It then took me another 4 years to edit. I'm still editing today. In fact, I'm going to be adding today a new principle to the Good Life Creed, which is in a later chapter. So it's an ongoing effort. But I think the book's good enough to be sharing and have it out there. So it's out there. So I'm going to read today. Every Saturday morning, I come here to Huntington Beach, here on the sands at 17th Street, where it meets the beach, just between Lifeguard Tower 16 and 18. There is no Lifeguard Tower 17. Hi, Sam. Keep warm. Thank you. I will. Here we go. And I'll wander about as I go. Okay. Now, if I remember right, this is a pretty long chapter. Let's see if I have the fortitude. And it's the chapter that the book got its name from. There we go. Ooh, boy, that wind is cold. Okay, the chapter Going Alone has an illustration here. Here's the title. It's a man on a bus with no driver in a sea. And I had Emily make that, and it's my illustration of what I call the pirate ride, the lack of free will, simply traveling through the universe, and jostled around by the forces of nature, by the consequence of all things unfolding, with seemingly feeling like we're in control, but I don't think we really are. I think the universe has, as I like to say, a lot to say, if not everything to say, about our decisions. So here we go, Going Alone, the chapter within the book of the same name. Going Alone, discovering a universe without apparent meaning. And I'm going to walk around to stay warm. And there's a quote here. A major breakthrough of the scientific revolution, perhaps its greatest breakthrough, was to refute the intuition that the universe is saturated with purpose. That's a quote from Steven Pinker. Here we begin. The great indifference is a perspective which yields an improved understanding of the apparent true nature of the universe. It is a place of clear thought and relentless truth. The way there is never easy, never marked, and can only be reached in solitude, and when the only chance of return is under the power of one's own volition. What you find there may be worth the journey, even if only you alone can understand or appreciate the prize. There is no road or trail to the great indifference, for followers must always lose the way. Strike out at once along the direction of your first inclination, and your own path will soon be discovered. Note what you find or do not find, as discovery alone is its own satisfaction. And whatever you later relate to others will fall like alien words upon ears plugged and deafened by fraternity, solidarity, and the warm comfort of common society. Only your fellow travelers in wildness might understand, though their own solitary venture may insulate their ears to whatever vain utterances you elect to voice. I recommend this way to those who are ready to lose, prepared to be wrong, and desirous of truth ahead of comfort, peace, or immortality. Come this way for the sake of virtue, for a sound mind, an even temper, a restful heart, and at last an honest death, an end without hope of reward, reawakening, or revelation, a fixed point of terminus punctuated upon the tail end of eternity, which is everything after the end of one's living. The vista of the great indifference will direct your gaze to your bruised, sore, and bleeding feet, which are the instruments of your arrival in that august place. The pain will grow intense with your notice, a gratifying reality. How sweet the moment of awakening, when the uncaring, corpse-like gaze of reality makes precious the breath of this moment and the next, without thought of for any breath beyond, which is only a wishful potential vapor, nor the breaths already consumed, which have dispersed to mingle with the universal atoms, to never again return orbit round this fleeting mortal constitution. I would tell you the way to the great indifference if I truly thought I could, and I would if I thought I could. I can't. Though if you go where I said it was found, then the telling would guarantee its absence. Go instead on your own, by your own motive force, along a way only you can see, alone and accepting of your solitude, aware you may never come back, and if you do, that you may never find words to adequately convey what you truly found. And I really can't. I can't tell anyone the way there. Okay, now what begins after that, that's the prose piece where I introduce it. What follows from that is the part I call, it's in italics here, it's the part I call the notes from the muse. This is the stuff that came to me more of inspiration along the way. I didn't have to really work at it, and I've never had to edit it. Once written down, it was there for good. Oh, wow. The big current is rolling again, like it was 2 days ago. I don't know if you can see it. The whole shoreline ocean current is moving along here. And there's a dude way the hell out there. Wow. He's way out. Anyway, here we go. Notes from my muse. When I talk about going alone, some may think I'm referring to hiking and camping all by oneself. That's partially right. But mostly I'm referring to a mental endeavor to seek after and develop life principles without the reinforced comfort of authority, dogma, or consensus. This doesn't require thinking up the ideas oneself, but instead using reason to discern if a proposition is true and fits with the reality of the world around us. That's going alone. It's only coincidence that being alone in very wild places is an excellent forum for rendering truth from the abundance of comforting propositions and stories we tell one another to keep back the dark. When you're alone in the dark, there's nowhere the truth can hide. Emily and I lingered at the beach tonight until it was nearly dark. Just before we left, a middle-aged man arrived, limping badly and wearing nothing more than a swimsuit and a beach towel around his neck. He deposited the towel on a rock and limped with difficulty straight into the sea. Once in the cold water and free of his bad leg, he began swimming powerfully out to sea, diving under a few large waves before making it clear of the surf. We watched him swim straight and direct, further and further, as the night got darker and darker. We saw him swim past a family of dolphin, passing far beyond the last rocks, in water more than 50 feet deep. The man never veered his course or turned either up or down the coast, but kept straight for open ocean, swimming hard and fast. He must have been more than a quarter mile out when darkness overtook our efforts to follow. My last sight of the man was a single swing of his arm rising above the now black sea. I noticed the streetlights were on as Emily and I made our way back to the motorcycle, and I wondered if these would guide the man back to shore when he'd had enough of his solo, nighttime, winter, ocean swim. I'm haunted by the desert now. The pull is powerful and relentless, like a vacuum drawing something to nothing. At the bookstore just now, I discovered a book titled Route 66 Ghost Towns. I eagerly read through the sections on the desert railroad communities of Essex, Amboy, Baghdad, Ludlow, Newberry Springs, and Daggett. The chapter ended with no mention of Siberia. It would seem I've made a very good choice in selecting Siberia as my adopted hometown. By this time tomorrow, I'll be in Siberia. I'll arrive about an hour before sundown, as temps begin to descend from midday highs around 110 degrees, or 43 degrees Celsius. There are no ghosts in Siberia, though there is much that is dead. The void left by humanity passing away here has made room for possession by the wind, the heat and cold, and the steady progress of time. These things ignore my presence, though they'd appear different if I was not alone. I'd see only ruin and desolation with another. I'd see ghosts which were never there. I leave a thinning trail of connection with every mile I put between my life and the desert. This thread grows so slender that 100 miles out I dangle like a spider on a silk strand. The melodramatic abyss looms, a humorous caricature of nature. If only it weren't so real. I hang here for a day in the wind and the sun, knowing the threat of exposure is nothing compared to the frailty of that one long, slender thread. The steep and rugged mountains of Japan never scared me. Even that time I ran from the mother boar, and again several times when giant hornets swarmed to check me out. The mountains were far too civilized with life to offer any real threat. Not human life, but life itself. The mere fact that the landscape had a pulse, and a vibrant one at that, dissuaded my fear and alleviated my apprehension. Even to die in those remote, unpeopled mountains would be to pass in the embrace of what is both familiar and alive. The desert offers no such comfort. What lives there is sparse, mute, and still. There's little hum or buzz or grunt, just some howl from time to time, which carries lonesome sentiment and a desperate pleading. Even birdsong sings of solitude. The wind speaks loudest here, and the sun burns its case without respite from sunup to sundown. I fear the desert, even before I go. I'm halfway to Siberia and thinking of that long 100-mile thread I mentioned earlier today. Could it be that the thread actually originates out here? How alike the unthinking wastes of nature and the timeless non-existence before death and after birth. During the night at Siberia, I left camp to wander alone over the desert in search of night things, nocturnal spiders and snakes, and the things which stare from the dark with glimmering eyes, and the stars which come out, and the moon in its time. The wind, too, enjoys the night, moving in warm gusts over the land, always inward, towards the deep center of the desert. While thus employed, during my nighttime hike, I came upon that stone-lined footpath I've mentioned before. With nowhere better to go, I followed for a pace, minding the path's straight course from darkness into darkness, thinking over the mind, process, and hands which produced this way. What motive brought it about? What purpose did it serve? With every footstep here long removed by the wind, only my own senseless allegiance to precedent justifies a cause I can never know. The desert is as sorry a companion for thought as it is for fraternity. I sometimes claim that my muse lives here, though this is a lie. Whatever sentience moves across the dark sands comes no further than the outskirts of my camp. I mistake its eyes reflected in my light for those of the fox who lived here first. Neither will come nearer than reflection, nor suggest more than aloof disinterest. The desert and the fox leave me to my own devices, to find thought and words of my own on my own, caring for neither credit nor attribution. A nondescript slice of concrete in the desert marks the spot where a small island of gas pumps once stood. I discovered the remains of this old Route 66 service station by studying satellite imagery of the desert around the ghost town of Siberia. While exploring the site, my mind contrived the story of human ambition and loss here, which I suspect may bear more than fleeting resemblance to fact. And the ghosts I've borne in my mind for this place are now condemned to haunt these ruins for the rest of my days. I discovered all that remains of the gas station and cafe at the California ghost town of Siberia. Sal and Ruth built this place in the 20s out of mortar and desert sand. The combination home and business had 2 gas pumps and a service garage with a maintenance pit. There was a separate door into the cafe which had wooden floors and where Ruth served her customers on fine decorated chinaware. When traffic on the old highway at last gave out, Ruth and Sal made the tough decision to leave their life's work behind, to fall to ruin and fade into the desert, while the couple sought better fortune elsewhere. Today, nothing remains of the gas station and cafe but stone foundations and the outline of lives now smothered in indifference. I further found the stairs which led into the abandoned roadside diner at Siberia, California. How many road-weary American pilgrims stepped up and through the door here for a half hour of relief from the trials of crossing the harsh desert in an unreliable jalopy, or miners coming in from the surrounding claims for a welcome taste of civilization and a home-cooked meal. How many would-be Californians, like my own great-grandfather, came here dreaming of a better life if they could only get across this cursed desert? It is possible my great-granddad may have actually been here. Did he perhaps at one time step up these 2 steps to receive his first formal welcome into California after his long journey from Illinois? The places of rest were few at that time along this inhospitable stretch of America's Mother Road, making the odds he'd been here not unreasonable nor very far-fetched. High desert temperatures today kept me near Siberia and far from the frontier where the great indifference doesn't loom. Why does it remain so far? Why can't it reclaim the ghost town in the same way as the nocturnal fox who haunts my camp, or the ruin which spoils every human artifact here? It seems human absence is not enough. All reminder must be gone, save the living pulse of a solitary individual, far off trail, far from any comfort or aid, which is the only companionship the great indifference may ever abide. I wonder if I'll sense this strange absence just before the light of my life winks out, when my body is far off trail, beyond any comfort or aid, when the dark frontier grows near and reality swells with dead promise. I suspect I will. I suspect that's how we all die. And the reason we'd cling so desperately to this wondrous thing of life, we sense that our living is something of a revolt, a strange and orderly uphill climb against the pull of universal disorder and chaos. The great indifference is that carrying gravity well we hope to avoid by averting our eyes towards fellowship, love, and laughter, and by telling ourselves and one another comforting stories of reunion, reconciliation, and forgiveness. But the night doesn't care about our fear, nor the wind or our chill, nor solitude our lonesome desperation. Better than stories is to face the night, stand in the wind, and embrace today the ones we love. Then, when we discover indifference looming with the intake of our final breath, we can close our eyes and smile peacefully at the inevitable reunion arrived at after a well-lived life. That right there, that sums up the whole book in one paragraph. That's pretty much everything. Hold on. I need a little warm coffee to warm me up. So let's have a sip. Let's take a short break. I think I saw a comment. Good morning, Kurt. Gorgeous backdrop. Hi, Andy. Isn't it a beautiful one? It is nice. I'm going to have a little coffee and then continue. The big waves are still here. Sorry to be blocking it. But they're more orderly than before. There's a guy surfing over there. Although the waves are a little hard to catch. They seem to kind of roll under the surfers. I've had that experience many times. It's frustrating to be among such great, beautiful big waves and not to be able to actually catch them. I think that frustration was from my youth, though. I don't think that would bother me much anymore. What part? When will you start surfing? When the weather gets better? I'll start surfing as soon as I get a surfboard and a wetsuit. I found a guy here that sells surfboards out of his backyard. I might go and check him out. But first, I need to get to Japan and get that adventure doing. And by then that'll take me to mid-February. Maybe at the start of March I'll have a surfboard. I think I'm starting to get into shape, so that's good. Ooh, oh, this is helping. Well, hey Andrew, what are you and Chia up to this Sunday? You gonna start planning for your trip to Japan in June? Canadians always wear dry suits up here on the west coast of Vancouver Island. They surf this time of year, cold, big waves. I used to live in Northern California, right by the Oregon border, and I surfed there, and I remember it being very cold. I wore a 5'3" wetsuit, 5 millimeters in the body and 3 millimeters in the arms and legs, and a hood. Man, it was cold. A dry suit's a smart idea. So I was pretty proud. Yumiko and I were proud of our tickets. Yes, we are planning it out now. Fun. Yeah, it's so much fun. I'm working on an itinerary. I've got it all visualized. It's on my website. If you go to the About section, and then there's the Return to Japan trip. And I started adding the itinerary, day-by-day itinerary of all the details down there. We were pretty proud of the tickets. We got them about $850 each. We're going to fly into. We decided to fly into Haneda instead of. Now you being going down to Fukuoka. I don't know. You're going to fly into Osaka maybe. Is there a direct flight to like Fukuoka or something? I wonder how you're going to get there. But our tickets were at $850 each, which seemed pretty good. It was, and I looked at the breakdown, and it turns out it was only $250 for the ticket, and all the rest was fees. Flying into Osaka, yeah, that's and then just take the bullet, then just go into Osaka, Shinosaka Station, get the bullet train all the way down, right? That's good. I used to live just where the new airport is off the coast there. I used to live at Sakai City. Yumiko and I did. Just so I used to be able to see the airport and the planes coming in. Hanging out there in Kyoto. Are you going to hang out in Kyoto for a good bit? Good. When will you be next in Japan? Miss that place. I'll be in Japan in 4 weeks. Yumiko and I are going there for a visit. We're going to go. We're searching for houses. We're looking. We've got communities we're looking at. I'm getting houses we're looking at. We're going to talk to realtors. Emily was over last night. Hanging out with us. She came over for dinner last night, and she's like, "Mom and Dad, are you guys going to buy a house?" And I'm like, it's possible, So, I mean, maybe I don't know, maybe we'll come back with a house. Because we're getting close. Yumiko's retiring next year, and I'm retiring in 2025. So if we buy a place now, then we just leave it there. Alidane says, "It's nice to get you live." Yeah, thank you. Yay, Tart says. And I'm sorry I pronounced your name wrong. Okay, I'm going to resume my reading. So I finished this one here. I'm reading the chapter called Going Alone within the book Going Alone. So this is the notes from my Muse section. It's just random sections, disjointed sections of prose, which is to me the most important part of the book. These are the parts, these elements here in italics, these whole sections in italics, where it felt like a ghost was talking to me. When I was writing, the parts of this book that are standard prose, like right here, where it's non-italic, that's the part that I wrote deliberately, sitting at my desk or mostly sitting under the bridge out there at Siberia, writing it down. The stuff in italics, it felt like someone else was writing. And the funny thing is, the stuff in italics never needed editing. It came out perfect the first time. I've never had to edit that stuff. The stuff that's the standard prose, edit years after years of editing to do that. And it's kind of a mystery. Now, I don't believe in any supernatural stuff. I don't think that there's any real ghost or any muse or anything like that. I believe that the stuff in italics was the consequence of the inspiration, the moment, the circumstance, all that stuff conspiring to that. Mountain or ocean when you're back in Japan? Mostly ocean. We're going to the Izu Peninsula. It's a big peninsula that sticks out of south of Tokyo. or I should say east of Tokyo. You can't see it. There's a big island out there. It's bigger than that island out there. And we're going to go down and Yumiko and I are going to we're going to visit fishing villages along the way there and pick out one that we want to live in. And we're also going to check out places along the Abe River in Shizuoka. And I found yesterday a house. I mean, I swear to gosh, I'm ready to buy this place today. It's a house by the sea in right on the Miho Peninsula, right where the Miho Peninsula is in Shimizu. It would be perfect for us, and I'm just tempted to just go over and just lay down here, give them the money, give me the deed, and then call that our house, and maybe not stay there forever, but just make that for the first couple of years that we're back, and then what will you do is, because it's perfect location, rent it out as an Airbnb. It's listed on Airbnb. It's in Shimizu City, right next to the Miho Peninsula. Most beautiful views of Mount Fuji you can imagine. It's like literally twice. It's almost as close as the water is here. It's maybe twice as far back from the water. You can hear the sound of the waves. It'd be perfect. So anyway, here we go. Continuing reading. Sorry for just going on and on. An early lunch in a Route 66 cemetery at the ghost town of Ludlow. Nearly all the graves here are unnamed, and assembled of scrap lumber and nails. Remembrance would be left to the imagination. And when you hear a pregnant pause between, that's when I'm moving from one bit to the other. So that's the bit I just read. Now I'll read this next bit. Today's desert adventure did yield a very pleasant surprise. In my youth, my body could tolerate much heat and outdoor exertion, with little impact besides a little weight loss and a propensity to go further than I should, resulting in many blind stumbles alone through darkened desert terrain after failing to find camp before sundown. Back then, I could go all day and into the night with little fatigue, and rarely dissuaded from my wilderness goal. After returning to California from my life in Japan, I found my new desert adventures were commonly cut short due to sudden exhaustion and the quite unfamiliar accompanying sense of fear over my physical well-being. I chalked this new limit up to my advancing age and resigned myself to a fate of steadily diminishing horizons with each successive year. And then came today. Wow! My old self has seemingly returned. At dawn, I hiked a few miles out from the ghost town at Siberia, cautious of the summertime desert inferno I knew would soon arrive, and concerned my body might quickly give out with the heat, extreme exposure, and exertion. By the time I returned from this first hike, the heat was indeed on, and I'd greedily consumed all my water before I arrived back at camp. I should have been redlined, but I was ready to go out again, and I did. After refilling my canteens, I struck out for round 2, and an even longer and harder hike. By the time I was back again, the day was hotter and the water was again no more, yet my body seemed ready to do it all over again. I held back, though, not wanting to press too far into this surprising, rediscovered capability. It's 4:30 p.m. now, and the desert will soon begin to cool. I feel as lively and ready as I did at dawn, though the 8 liters of water which I've today drank and sweat away have left my exterior a sun-scorched, salty, dusty, and stinky mess, just like when I was young. How nice to meet my youthful self again out here in the summertime desert wastes. But don't worry, I won't be fooled. I'm 53, not 25, and no matter how good I feel today, I must always respect my true age and body's true condition. And for the record, that was a momentary experience. My feeling my age did indeed return, and now I'm 50, almost 59. The desert around Siberia goes on tonight without me. Another dark passage of night like billions before and billions to come. My presence so brief and fleeting and irrelevant as to escape notice of something with no capacity to notice. Such futile ends those delicious thoughts under the railroad bridge, so meaningless to eternity my vain attempts at virtue. Still, I think. Still, I pursue virtue. For eternity was never mine, and relevance is found in each moment of common human connection. Let the universe go on, and pursue whatever mindless ends it holds with the patience of an immortal. Time was never mine. Just these moments, just these words. That's the one I want to put on my headstone. I like that. Another one that captures the spirit of the book. I'd bring others with me to the desert if I didn't already know that solitude would retreat before our advance. The hot desert months protest my every ambition. Those far mountains, impossible. Those near hills, don't even think about it. A few days camping exposed upon the alluvium, maybe a day. Such dreams are reserved for winter, though even then I sense mute protest to my every solitary excursion. I previously believed that winter was the best season for desert hiking. Cold nights, snug in my good sleeping bag, warm, temperate days when I can walk for miles while drinking little and sweating less. But now I'm suspect summer has become my preferred time to hike in the desert. I'm not there for the walk, after all, or the sights, or, heaven forbid, any companionship. My aim is the limits, which are much nearer and more distinct when the temperature is above 100 degrees or 37 C. A simple August walk half a mile from camp, while the inferno burns and the landscape twists and shimmers with threat, goes as deep as a 5-mile December excursion over black barren peaks and through long twisting valleys of stone. Though I can turn and see camp or the road or my motorcycle seemingly nearby under the summer sun, my mind presses such comforting thoughts aside with much concerned attention to my red, swelling hands and my nearly empty canteen, the total lack of any sheltering shade and the onset of a woozy haze and dizziness, and faltering ability to see or think straight. Indifference looms then, surrounds, envelops, and ignores me as only its nature and capability demand. My skin then threatens to dry and crisp, and my bones to bleach and break, as my folly and insignificance are held like twin gifts in hands held upright in the direction of safety. This is what I sought with such difficulty in the winter wilds. This is what I found so easily in the summer desert, within footsteps of my car, when I had only the foresight to go alone, knew better, and went anyway. Is it possible to will a place to become haunted? If so, then I suspect I succeeded this weekend during my visit to the desert ghost town of Siberia. The ghosts I made there are only as real as the emotions I used to create them, and they followed me away from that place when I returned home and will haunt my memory for as long as I live or care to recall. The ghosts will die with me, just like the prior passing of the real persons whose hidden history is their secret inspiration. But such is the way of hauntings, to derive from hinted facts, to then grow and live by imagination, until the imaginer themselves becomes nothing more than a faint and shadowy impression, an indistinct suggestion of facts, a muse and inspiration to the imagination of generations to come. Go with a friend to discover something you share. Go alone to find something you may be unable to share. A stone wall is all that remains of the old railroad station at Siberia. The stones which make up the wall were pulled by the builders from surrounding desert alluvium and represent well the long and diverse geologic history of the region. The stones include layered sedimentary rocks formed when this place was the bottom of a shallow sea. There's pink rhyolite which flowed from a nearby volcano. One stone includes coarse breccia from an ancient landslide or waterfall, while still another is a lovely conglomerate formed at the bottom of a deep pool at the end of a long series of rapids, perhaps in the age of dinosaurs. Though the wall itself represents very recent events in human history, the stones and sands of which it is made tell a much older and more interesting story. This same story is told by the desert itself, if only we have eyes to see. Warming my hands by this small fire, The dark and vacant night crowds close with its silent depth. There's little fuel left, just a few small sticks from someone else who'd been here. Where are they now? There are no lights in the night. It seems I'm truly alone. But that's always been the case. Even in a crowd, my flame, like the flame of all others, burns at the discretion of just my attendants. The fuel is not the matter. There's plenty of that. It's the attendance and the effort I make to pile on more fuel, to stir the coals. But now my arms grow weak, as they've been doing for years, since about age 40. And my thoughts a little slow and stray, forgetful even, to tend the fire. That's why it's become so small, just a dimming light in the infinite night. I'm tired now. It's time for a rest. I'll just lay down here on the soft sand. It's warm from the day which has already passed, a comforting reminder of the life that was. I'll just close my eyes for a bit. The fire seems fine. I'm sure the coals will still be glowing at dawn. The night always ends well. That's always what I've said. I remember struggling with that a little bit with that last sentence. That's always what I've said. I almost wrote, that's how I originally wrote it. That's always what I said. And I thought, that doesn't seem clear. It should be. That's what I've always said. But then I realized the way I wrote it was exactly the way I intended it. So I kept it that way, even though it's a little hard to read and I stumble on it now even. Well, look at the size of that wave. Walking in the mountains of Japan consumed my mind in direct proportion to the distance moved. If I walked 5 miles, then my mind was never further than that same distance. No place, then, was really very wild, even though I sometimes went where I suspect nobody had ever been. Desert miles stretch all out of proportion to distance. 5 miles or 50 are to the same effect. Even 50 yards can do the job when conditions are right. Lately, it seems I don't even need to go. Just remembering the desert is becoming enough. That never happened with the mountains or the sea or with solitude alone. I'm tempted to think the desert is coming for me, has me trapped in some way. But that's nonsense. Indifference doesn't... Can't turn the page. Indifference doesn't care, is incapable of giving a damn. It's all in my mind. My vain attempt to hold on to what I found, to gain some purchase in reality that might survive my passing. But the desert doesn't care, nor the mountains, nor solitude, though the desert voices this silence the loudest. That last bit there, that whole section right there, was really hard to read. It kind of stumbles out. It's like trying to do a complicated dance. Again, though, that's exactly the way I wanted it to be, even though I struggle to read it. When I do read it, I go, yeah, it's hard to say, but that's exactly how I wanted to say it. It's a strange thing. There goes the guy charging out. He's got a hoodie on, too. He knows the cold. That look on the old man's face, even though we were both at a crowded mall, surrounded by effervescent living. A warm summer evening, crowds of young people living. Did he see the indifference? Was that why his gaze went past everyone into nothing? I think he did. He doesn't need the desert. He's almost there. Another break for coffee. I remember writing that. It came when I saw a man, that was when I was in the heat of discovering the great indifference. And, having witnessed it out in the desert, reflecting on it here. And I saw that old man at the crowded mall, disengaged, seemingly looking past everything. And I thought, wow, he's near enough to death that he can see past the distraction. This is before I had the principle of distraction. He can see past the distraction, even though I didn't word it that way, to the great indifference beyond his own coming death. Well, not that his death is the great indifference, but his own sense of mortality, his own coming death, clarifies the emptiness. I think there's a surf contest going on over there today. Wow, that guy's got a hell of a ride. Holy Moses. I think there is a surf contest happening over there today. They got banners up and everything. That guy's got the best ride I've ever seen ridden out here. Holy Moses, I wonder if he's a professional surfer. I think he is. Ooh, cool, cool, cool. Okay, back to it. Tart, nice looking forward to the continuation of your postponed abandoned tea farm adventures. Yes, although when I'm in Japan this time, I probably won't have much time for any of that. Although maybe I'll try to sneak out and do that in the morning. Mostly this trip is a reconnaissance trip to find a new home. Or actually, better said, to find a new community. The new home will follow after that. Let me move around a little bit. That seagull is carrying something big in its mouth. Look at the size of these waves. This old man here, my back starts to get sore if I don't move around enough. All these healthy people running on the beach back there. Man, those are some good waves. Woo! Okay, let's carry on. I wrote recently of tending a campfire. However, it's been years since I've actually built one. That's true. I prefer now to let darkness come on its own when I'm alone in the wild. I'll use a light to set up camp or a flame to cook my meal. But when the camp is set and my stomach is full, I'll switch off the light and sit alone in the vast darkness, almost like before. So true, I never use fires. I asked myself today why my thoughts so often turn to death and the related subjects of emptiness, indifference, and oblivion. It's because I enjoy life and I believe there's nothing to follow after we die. I believe that what waits after death is the same utter void we didn't know before we were born. I believe all this love and laughter, challenge and struggle, and the many opportunities to be and to do good will pass away completely the instant our mind shuts off and our being begins to dissolve away. I believe there will be no chance for reunion, reconciliation, or justice after our functions cease. So, by the way, that's directly from the principle of Oblivion that I have, that no final reunion, reconciliation, or justice. It echoed right there. This is before I wrote that principle down, though. And I believe that we will never again awake into anything like what we are now, though our matter and energy may in fact be used by others. So, if this is what I believe, then I guess it's no wonder I spend a lot of time thinking about and gazing into the void. No wonder I go to wild places. That's why I choose the desert, and the reason I always go alone. For whenever I return from such places or such thoughts, I always come back a better man, more sober and composed, less troubled by petty things, more engaged with my family, more at ease with who I am, better resolved towards being a good man, and more prepared for the absolute end I must very soon face, alone. That's one I should answer, because I do get comments sometimes from folks, especially on social media, saying, why do you always talk about death? That's why. Just one more week until the start of flash flood season in the California desert. Soon my dark and silent nights in Siberia will come alive with thunder, lightning, and rain in the nearby Bristol Mountains. These summer storms create powerful and short-lived rivers which appear suddenly from nowhere to spill from canyons and dissipate across the broad alluvial plain where I sleep. The floods carry heavy sediment loads of coarse rock and sand, which are deposited atop the desert, adding new layers to a geologic story which began 34 million years ago, in a period when grasslands first appeared on Earth and rainforests retreated to the equator. The story goes on, year upon year, century after century, for countless millennia, with few observers and nobody to know the full tale. There are two types of swim into deep water. that I enjoy, swim into deep water in quotes, that I enjoy in my life. The first is any solo adventure which stretches the bounds of safety and puts me beyond easy reach of help. I enjoy these experiences for the impression of frail vulnerability I gain whenever I am alone with the great indifference and have no friend or comfort to turn to. The second, swim into deep water, is when I find some way to honestly undermine my own beliefs or anything else which I think is true. Sadly, this is becoming less easy now that I've killed so much of my worldview, and am left only with a handful of I don't knows. It seems there's little existential threat to admitted ignorance, though there's lots of discomfort if you don't like not knowing and find yourself all alone with your doubt. But then that's where the first and second types of deep water meet, deep water in quotes, and where we enter the very deep water, which I call the deep end of the ocean, again in quotes, because those are quoting sections of the reference areas from the book. The deep end of the ocean is where admitted ignorance and accepted indifference come together and cancel one another out. The very deep sea grows still here in the face of the fact that we don't really know the answer we might previously have thought so sure, while simultaneously recognizing that the universe does not or is incapable of giving a damn about our troubling dilemma. I don't get to swim in deep water very often, as life has a way of sending rescuers to such places to quickly extract and return us back to work, or to our friends, or our family, or our church, bar, shopping mall, television, or anything else that gives us comforting suckle, while reassuring us that we are right and, in fact, not alone. So I'll take such swims as I can, and when I'm able, and with a little luck I'll one day drown out there, far to sea, alone, with my doubt, beyond any savior, trembling within the dark indifferent depths above, below, and everywhere all around. That gets the point. The most disturbing thing about being alone in the desert isn't what you might find there, but what you won't. The volcanoes of the eastern Mojave Desert are largely extinct due to the way in which they were formed. Each cinder cone and lava dome in this region had its origin deep within the Earth's upper mantle. This geologic story began roughly 100 miles northeast of the intersection of the North American and Pacific crustal plates, which form the San Andreas Fault, where this fault crosses the San Bernardino Mountains at Cajon Pass. Though these plates are running laterally against one another, there is sufficient subduction of the Pacific plate to draw water-rich oceanic crust deep into the mantle below the North American plate. The introduction of water into the mantle at those depths lowers pressure such that large bubbles of hot magma form, which begin to rise up into the Earth's solid crust. It's essentially the same process which causes bubbles to form in a bottle of pop after the cap is removed. These bubbles of molten rock burn their way slowly through the miles of solid rock as they rise towards the surface, cooling, changing, and growing smaller as they go. Tens of thousands of years later, the molten bubbles of magma arrive at the surface to pop as small, short-lived volcanoes, or simply to bulge through the surface without popping to form nicely symmetrical lava domes. While driving through the desert on Interstates 15, 40, or old Route 66, it's possible to see dozens of these extinct volcanoes and lava domes frozen at the moment of their death, when the last of their molten magma cooled upon reaching the surface of the Earth. We can even gauge how long their journey was by the color and texture of their rocks, with dark volcanoes rising more quickly than light-colored volcanoes, which enjoyed a longer or slower trip from the molten mantle to the surface of the Earth. 48 hours until I leave again for Siberia. It's a swim into deep water out there at this time of year, even at night. A warm glide over unfathomed depths in every direction. Sometimes out there I distract myself with living. It's an easy trick which we learn from birth, but the game becomes so apparent the moment I falter in my play, But the game becomes so apparent the moment I falter in my play. Like a man playing solitaire on a desert island, who suddenly looks up and remembers his real situation. There are no conspirators when I'm alone out there in the deep desert, nobody to help keep up the game, no one to share the illusion, none at all out there. If you don't enjoy criticism, then don't attempt to swim alone in the deep desert. If you don't like being wrong, then remain at home with your costly peace and certitude. I'd accept no something in exchange for my nothing. The desert took it all away from me, including the space where it once all belonged. I arrived at Siberia minutes after sundown and had only a short amount of time to set up camp before deep darkness enveloped the land. The only light or sound of humanity after nightfall here is the very rare passing of a vehicle on Route 66, or the commanding passage of a mile-long train moving up or down the Mojave Grade. The mountains to the south are 16 miles, 26 kilometers away. During summer thunderstorms, I sometimes see lightning in those mountains without hearing any sound of thunder. Silence and peace with every footstep and moment. Even now the desert quiet is with me. This has nothing to do with the desert really, though without the deep desert the spell might never have been broken. I used to worry that if I spent too much time alone out there, then I'd in some way never get back. Instead, what I found out there has seemingly become lost within me. It looks out through my eyes and sees the vast and terrible emptiness behind everything, reminding me to build and maintain sound principles of virtue, which are the tools and apparatus of a good and meaningful life. It hushes my mind with quiet when life rustles with demand, helping me to focus and attend to my responsibility, as well as the true ends of virtue. I see the nothing which awaits after life is done, which fact compels me now to act now in the name of virtue and the improved well-being of my fellows, as well as the well-being of those yet to come. I used to think I'd someday lose myself in the desert, though I never guessed I'd be lost until the desert indifference became lost in me. 90-minute countdown to departure for Siberia. I wonder if that fear I always meet along the way is waiting now to ambush me. It usually lurks out past Ludlow, not far from Pisgah Crater, on the right side of Route 66. When the fear comes, it always tracks me close beside the road, easily shadowing the big bike as I roll and glide through the black lava fields. In winter, it's dark already when I arrive, so I can't see, but I know it's there. In summer, like now, it seems to move stealthily along the rocks while waiting for nightfall, which approaches fast from the east. The fear does something to me about 3 miles from Siberia, where I always want to turn back. Haven't yet, but who knows tonight. Turning in onto the dirt road to the Siberia ruins, I've more important and real worries to attend to, as navigating a 600-pound motorcycle on a dirt road is real fear enough to dispel any mere phantom. Once I arrive and shut off the bike, the fear is gone. It wasn't like that the first or even the second time I went, when I cowered in the car with the doors locked, staring out at the dark. I felt like such a kid then. It's a wonder I went back. No more, though. When the bike's engine stops and the desert silence swarms in, all fear, every last bit, drains away. Another sip of coffee. Man, I swear to goodness, these waves are getting bigger. Oh, and here's our lifeguard. I think that definitely is a contest going on over there. There's people piling up on the beach. Another tent has been set up. The banner is out. I can see a big group of people starting out there in the water. A curious place for the surf contest, though. Man, there are some powerful, good waves out there, though. Jeez Louise. Okay, that's the last of my coffee. Got to get through the rest. But I got to move a little bit first. This old back of mine. Can't quite take it anymore. That's a good peak right out there. Wow. I feel like I'm a hula dancer. Okay. I got coffee in my glasses. Oh my gosh, that's a big wave. Okay. Have I arrived in Siberia, or has Siberia arrived in me? Greetings from Siberia. It's dark now and big. This place is so big. As I sit here on the hot, dark sand, I think I figured something out. I know now why this place can't get me, why I'm not afraid here anymore, why the solitude in the night and the indifference can't take me away. Though it's got me now, and there's nowhere to run. It's because I'm connected, deeply connected, to my wife and my daughter and my brother and my mom, and the others too. I try hard with my family, and I do a pretty good job, I think. Not so much the others. It's my failing, one of many. These connections, though, do the trick, I think. They keep me safe, prevent my mind from wandering to places from which I might never return. In 1989, I left my girlfriend, now my wife, behind in a small college town near Oregon while I embarked on a great life adventure. I made it as far as the desert, in fact, not far from where I am now, just over the Bristol Mountains to the northwest, near the west shore of Soda Dry Lake. Something happened to me then which caused me to promptly return to Yumiko. I gave up the desert then. I knew I was about to go too far into the wild. Not physically, but that other way. I sensed then, quite rightly, that if I'd continued then, I'd never have made it back. I was right. I know that now. Now I'm back in the desert, 28 years later. The same threat looms here like before. I can sense it. But I'm not afraid. It can't get me. I'm too strong now. Though my body is weak, my spirit, resolve, and hard-won maturity are more than a match for the great indifference. Not so in my youth. If I'd stayed then, I would surely have been consumed. And I do believe that is true. It's a good thing I didn't stay all those years back. I don't expect to remember life. That's all it is. One sentence. Every swim into deep water comes at a price. The cost is the genuine quality of our connection with those we left behind. For as our universe expands with them, we find we've less to relate and have fewer common connections. That's why we so often choose society over solitude, institutions over independence, and the status quo over the strange and the unknown. Venture too far or too long into deep water, and we risk losing sight of shore. The place where you swim then is very real. It just won't seem so to others. And the things you describe, well, perhaps it's better you just keep these things to yourself. Enjoy your society. Relish your institutions. Abide the status quo if it be good and just and of virtue. Just don't forget where you've been and what you've seen. Jeez, oh my gosh, that's a huge wave. That guy is totally, there's two guys, they're totally killing it. Oh. At one point during my hike in the desert today, I took refuge from the heat under a bridge where Route 66 crosses a desert wash. I found a Japanese book under the bridge. The book describes a round-the-world bicycle journey. Handwritten Japanese writing on the back of the book read, I will not die far from home. I will make it back alive. Yumiko tells me the writing is a man's handwriting, and the language in the style of the Kansai region of Japan. My book should draw like vacuum and drain like death. I know when I wrote that one that I was echoing Emerson's writing when he wrote, my book should smell of, what is it, should hum with the resound of incense, smell of, Emerson wrote, my book should smell of pines and resound with the hum of insects. I know I was echoing that when I wrote this. My book should draw like vacuum and drain like death. Thank you, Mr. Thoreau and Mr. Emerson. And here come two young girls, surfers heading out into this. Or maybe it's one girl and a guy. But they're young. They're like teens or something. Look at them. Take another with you if all you want is adventure. Life can pass easy that way. This way. Though I suspect at times you'll wonder if there's more. There isn't. Which is an awful fact. Quick, cover it up with distraction. Turn back to the comfort of friends. Clasp your hands in prayer. Keep yourself company with the sound of your own voice. Just don't go alone, unless you really want to see. Oh, just watching these young people, this girl, and it's a young boy and a young girl going out in these huge waves. You're probably going to see them float past. They're heading out right over there, and then they're going to get in the water. I'll just turn it, you can see. They're standing on the thing right there. See them standing there? I wonder if I can zoom in. I can. And they're going to head out, and the current's going to take them and float them past us. Good for them. So we'll see them bob past in just a sec. And they look like heroes standing there. Take another. Okay, I already did that one. Though I missed the mark yesterday in the desert, failed to disconnect, failed to become lost. I did, however, find trace of someone else's success. That Japanese man who left his book beneath a Route 66 bridge. The boldly scribbled note he left on the back of the book. There's no doubt he met the great indifference. It's not just in my mind. It's really not out there. My goal from last weekend's hike was to safely explore how many hours I could hike into the day after sunrise and before things started to get dangerous. The answer is about 4 hours on a day when temps will max out around 110 degrees Fahrenheit or 43 degrees C. But that was with 3 stops to rest under various flash flood bridges beneath the railroad tracks on Route 66. These stops were crucial to bringing my body temperature down, and there is absolutely no other shade in the open desert to use for this purpose, as there is no other shade. If I hadn't had those bridges to rest under, I think the hike could have been only 2 hours or less. I could literally feel my body temperature rising like a kettle on a stove while walking exposed to the desert sunlight. This is especially true after 9 a.m. The experience was rather alarming, and I definitely would not want to be caught an hour or more from camp during summer any time after 9 a.m. I must keep the summertime hiking to either nighttime or just a few hours after dawn. A very good lesson learned. You can see there's the boy and the girl. They're bobbing past us. And here comes the lifeguard. They're just past the lifeguard truck there now. They're going to make it out. Good for them. The boy must be like no more than like 14. And the girl, she's lagging a little bit behind. The current's starting to take her. She just ducked under a wave. She's going to get pounded a little bit in the surf. And there's a big set coming through. There she goes, drifting past. And there he goes ducking under too. Ooh, they're going to have a hard time. She's almost back on the beach again. Oh, I'm not laughing at her. It's a sympathetic laugh. I've been in that. And oh my gosh, he's going to get a big one pounding right on his head. That little 14-year-old boy. Good for them. Look at that. Mom and Dad are like, just go on. The giant waves and See you guys later for lunch. He's looking back. Maybe it's his sister. She's about to drift off of the edge there. He's reluctant to leave her behind, but he's in the pound zone now. Yeah, no, she's not making that out. She's not really even trying very hard. She's just, a lackluster paddle. Anyway. I found what's possibly another lost grave belonging to the desert ghost town of Siberia. The only reason I've even guessed it's a grave is because it matches so well with graves I've seen in other ghost towns along Route 66. This collection of arranged stones is located just a short way out from where the ghost town used to be. It's formed of hastily arranged stones and can seemingly serve no other useful purpose. Wooden crosses or headstones were commonly used on graves like this, though desert winds take their toll on such markers, and many graves I've seen are today missing their wooden markers and remain just a pile of outline of stones. I was a little delirious with the heat when I found this, and I'm afraid I probably couldn't find it again if I tried. And I haven't. I've never been able to find that grave again. It was just that one time. Not that I've really tried. I'm following that mysterious stone-lined desert path which runs from nowhere to nowhere within the desert ghost town of Siberia. This path has become a companion of sorts for me whenever I come here, as I always seem to stumble upon it during my nighttime walks. And I still find new traces of it when I meander about in the morning drinking my coffee. Invariably, my mind always wonders about the hands which so carefully placed these. Oh, now they're starting to make it out. He's about midway out, and she's starting to get there. Good for them. Go, go. I wish I had the courage to write all the words. I'd have thought it would be easier way out here, maybe after I lose sight of land, maybe only after I toss the compass over the side. I still don't have that courage. Route 66 camp at Siberia, California. It's summer now, and already I can feel the intensity of the sun as it crawls up slowly towards the horizon. The solar heat literally spills over the mountains before the sun can even be seen. It's like feeling the first trickle of a heat flood, which is about to engulf the desert. I get a little anxious in this hour of the day, and I tend to work fast. There's a drone just going overhead. And I tend to work fast, and I work fast to break camp and ready the motorcycle for a hasty retreat. The radiant heat energy of the desert is astounding, and there is absolutely nowhere to hide besides the shade under railroad and highway bridges, which I sometimes share with birds and jackrabbits. It's no wonder most of the animal life out here is nocturnal, hiding away from the sun at dawn just before the inferno switches on. Walking alone across the desert on a summer day can be a very lonesome experience. Where is everyone? Where are all the locals hiding? What do they know that I don't seem to grasp? Ready to depart Siberia, California. The night before was especially hot, only cooling to a comfortable level just before dawn. I ate my dinner while seated on the gravelly dirt, covered in sweat, wondering about male tarantulas which wander actively through the summer night looking for females. Though the wind was gentle this particular night, I did take precaution to lash the tent securely to the ground with pegs and ropes, and to angle the tent with the narrow sides facing east and west, which align the tent perpendicularly to the night wind, which can sometimes rise suddenly to blow with great intensity for hours through the night. Desert night winds, unless due to a storm, nearly always blow into the desert, which means west to east at Siberia, which fact allows me to reliably prepare my tent to weather the blast should it come. The night is quiet here in every season, except the trains, which literally blast through the dark with deep rumbling engines, which shake the ground, and resonant whistle blasts which echo off the black volcanoes. The stars also remain constant in every season, even when the Bristol and Bullion Mountains to the north and south are being drenched in summer thunderstorms. The air overhead at Siberia is nearly always clear and clean all the way to the Milky Way. Just satellites mar the view, or an occasional jetliner, strangely silent, remind me of my species. It's a good thing, such solitude. So much is lost then, so little gained. A very equitable trade. Okay, now we've reached that part. How are they doing, the boy and girl? There he is right over there. Where'd the girl go? Oh, there they are. They're walking up the beach. That's the dude that was standing there. He's out there. The boy and the girl they got pushed back in. They're walking back up. Yep, that longshore current drug them along. So you should see them. You might be able to see them walk past in just a second. Eventually, I won't need the desert or the silence. Oh, this is the part that's on the back of the book. This one right here is right there. Eventually, I won't need the desert or the silence or the stillness or the atmosphere of peace. Maybe then I'll understand the reason Emerson wrote that the wise man stays at home. With today's outing, I was experimenting with how long I could remain exposed and moving out in the open, on a desert on a day when temps would top out at around 110 degrees Fahrenheit or 43 degrees Celsius. I learned that I don't want to be more than an hour away from shade after approximately 8 a.m. I could probably extend that range by wearing more and better quality clothing, as it seems it's really the exposure to direct sunlight which drives my body temperature up so fast, rather than the simple fact of being outdoors. The sunlight hitting my exposed skin seems to transform an astonishing amount of heat energy, which might otherwise be blocked or deflected by a sensible layer of clothing. I'm planning to research the desert clothing solutions in use by desert-dwelling people in places like Africa and the Middle East for some tips and tricks to help keep me safe. Another idea is to carry some form of easy-to-assemble shelter, which I can quickly erect as a hiding place from the sun. I'm thinking perhaps of using a large reflective space blanket, secured to the ground with pegs and elevated with a short pole. For this journey, I was using the very nice, shady areas beneath flash flood bridges along both the railroad and Route 66. I'm certain I could easily spend the entire day under one of those bridges during even the hottest desert days. However, a smaller shelter, like my proposed space blanket tent, would likely offer far less cooling opportunity, and I'd need to experiment carefully with such options. An extra concern is the fact that since I'm on a motorcycle, there's no chance to escape the heat in a pinch by ducking into a car to enjoy the air conditioning. This means that I must always plan to get back to my bike with enough exposure reserves, new term perhaps, to get the big GSA fired up safely down the dirt road from Siberia and out onto Route 66, where I can enjoy the moderately cooling effect of a 60-plus mile-an-hour wind. Altogether, I'm very satisfied with this experiment, though I think the heat may have made me a bit delirious at times. I'm a little bit nervous now just remembering that. That was really scary. I remember those experiences. And there's that young guy and girl. I think they've given up. They've grabbed their bags and they're headed home. I'm not laughing at them. And I admire their resolve. This is a little bit too powerful today. Good for them for trying, though. I'm beginning to assemble some going alone best practices, suggestions for anyone interested in entering wildness alone in search of the great indifference. Of course, the first trick is knowing that you don't need to go to wildness to encounter indifference. You simply need to see past the thin veneer of meaning and illusory permanence we so expertly smear over everything and everyone around us. 1. Go alone, but return to someone you love. Reject all company in the wild. Reject even the desire to consult yourself. Let every new outing put yet another mile between you and everything that comforts and reassures your mind. With time, what you've left behind will be like a distant carnival of stimulation and distraction, a loud, brilliant spectacle of days leading to a fearful end few dare honestly consider or discuss. But beware going too far, too soon, or too young. For it is possible to go so distant into wildness that you can never get back, even if you find your way back. 2. Go alone, but find love in your life. Find a partner who will understand and who will be comfortable with you going to the wild alone. Someone to come back to, someone who will leave a light on for your return and who will warm you with their embrace when you reach out longingly to hold them after you've returned. Someone to appreciate after you've seen what's not really out there. It's not necessary that this person share your interest in such solitude or understand your reasons. It's enough that they accept this part of who you are and do not dissuade your reasonable pursuit of going alone. So, when dating, be upfront about this thing you do. Tell your potential partner about your practice of sometimes going alone to places off the map. While dating, engage in going alone. Mark the calendar with your scheduled outings and describe your plans. Consider wisely if this person cannot tolerate your solitary bent and trajectory. I'll include now a quote to illustrate my point about partnering with someone who can help us to stay grounded, though I hesitate doing so for fear this quote may be misunderstood. I'm not adding this to suggest the poet should necessarily find a non-poet or more domestic soul to share their life with, but only to point out what others have observed and which my own experience has borne witness. Let me share, then, a short passage from Nathaniel Hawthorne's extraordinary novel, The House of Seven Gables. In this particular section of the book, we learn about the platonic relationship between the old man Clifford and his young niece Phoebe. Clifford, being of the poetic sort, and someone lost to the world in a reality he can neither share nor make very real, and Phoebe, a young woman of grounded sentiment, made buoyant of her youth, practicality, and common sense. Phoebe brings a peace and fulfillment to Clifford's life, which is all out of proportion to anything he could offer the girl, though she does gain somewhat through the administration of her native charity and benevolence. The benefit of relations between the two is quite one-sided due to Clifford's advanced age and degraded mental prowess, though perhaps if he'd had someone like Phoebe in his youth, he might not have become so very lost, and she might too have gained from the unique qualities and gifts Clifford might have been in better position to share. And here's the quote. It's just beautiful. It's this whole section here. I just lifted it straight from the book, The House of Seven Gables. Now Phoebe's presence made a home about her, that very sphere which the outcast, the prisoner, the potentate, the wretch beneath mankind, the wretch aside from it, or the wretch above it, instinctively pines after. A home. She was real. Holding her hand, you felt something, a tender something, a substance, and a warm one. And so long as you should feel its grasp, soft as it was, you might be certain that your place was good in the whole sympathetic chain of human nature. The world was no longer a delusion. But looking a little further in this direction, we might suggest an explanation for the oft-suggested mystery. Why are poets so apt to choose their mates, not for any similarity of poetic endowment, but for qualities which might make the happiness of the rudest handicraftsman, as well as that of the ideal craftsman of the spirit? Because, probably, at his highest elevation, the poet needs no human intercourse, but he finds it dreary to descend and be a stranger. Makes me want to swoon. That captures what to my mind, people like me, people who want to go alone, who want that adventurous life. We need to come back to someone that can both understand and allow our indulgence, and also someone whom we can share our life. 3. No campfire. Let the night come on its own terms. Sit alone on the hard ground and let darkness arrive. Walk blind into the night, stumble and fall, and meet the fearful things you imagine are there. Return to your campsite both master and mastered. 4. No seat. Never bring any chair into the wild, nor create a seat. Just sweep away with your bare hands the larger stones and then sit on the ground, or in the sand, or on a rock, or better yet, stand and move always. 5. Find a desert. Go someplace hard and empty. Avoid places with soft grass on the ground or green leafy trees for shade. Find some place where no one goes. Find a place hot or cold or windy or bleak, a place where life isn't easy or welcome, where existence is hard, where you perceive threat in the empty. 6, no connectivity. Switch off the device and then never turn it back on. Or if your muse is catalyzed by sharing, then make the effort one way. Avoid checking or responding while in the wild, or better yet, ever. Avoid curating both your experience and your life. 7, no books. You know better. Leave the books at home. Though bring blank pages and a pencil or your blog. Do these things if you discover your muse meets you out there in the wastes. Listen and record what you hear them. Don't be embarrassed to share, though you'll likely be looked at and thought of increasingly odd if you do so honestly. 8, consider death at first light. Greet the dawn by imagining your own death and the deaths of your loved ones, and the eternity of utter empty to follow for each of you. Imagine that you'll never again see the ones you love, nor they you. Never again experience any thought or emotion. Ask yourself how you should best spend the coming day, cognizant of how few days really remain and how much you will very soon utterly lose when this life is done. So those are my 8 recommendations there. I'm gearing up now for today's ride and overnight at Siberia. The temperature forecast is 109 degrees Fahrenheit or 43 degrees Celsius and 113 degrees, 45 degrees Celsius for tomorrow. I always lose more in the desert than I gain. I wonder how much less there will be of me after I return. I wonder what part of me will evaporate away today and tomorrow in the heat and empty. I have a home, I have a wife, I have a daughter, and I have an extended family. And I have a place called Siberia. It's someplace that reminds me that the universe doesn't care. It's a place that threatens without acknowledging my presence. Its silence deafens my every hope and ambition. I become almost nothing here, for a night and then a day, before I go back to my wife and to my daughter and my family and my life. And I resolve then to make purpose and meaning where there is none, to identify virtue and make it my friend, and to vow allegiance to what is true, and to deny what is false, and to live a good life, a life of meaning, a life of love, a life well lived. I'm embarking on my first ever solo night hike in the desert. It's dark out there, and I have no reliable way to find my way back to the ghost town without lights or any sign of life. I won't go far this time, just until I can no longer touch bottom. The temperature today was around 110 degrees Fahrenheit or 43 degrees Celsius, with a gentle yet very hot wind blowing in from the west. It's hard to describe well the emptiness out here at night, with just my little pen light providing a dull haze of illumination in an ocean of black. The locomotives do thunder through from time to time, yet they seem as indifferent to my meek presence here as the night and the heat. I think it's their steel rails which insulate the occupants from the fearful reality which swims here in the night. A lot of me evaporated away into the hot desert night during this hike. I'm discovering that the stuff that goes wasn't necessary anyway. Each time I go to the desert, I return with less, and I'm a better man for the loss, more deliberate, more sincere, less distracted, lighter in every way. The desert quiet is everywhere with me now. Everything slower, silence, deep within the mind. Desert skies offer little impediment to elevated thought. Without clouds or much insulating humidity, between the earth and the vacuum of space, my thinking floats easily up and away from whatever might otherwise restrain or consume upon the firm bedrock of convention. If I float my ideas high enough, I can no longer make out the ground. Everything becomes a vast landscape of indifference. There's little difference in any direction. Even the deep dark above yawns awesome and deep. A similar infinity below towards the ground and everyone and around me on every side. I'm increasingly mute whenever I return. There seems little reason to share what I can barely find words to describe. There'll be just a sliver of moon 2 days hence when I arrive at Siberia. The moon will hang low in the west just after I arrive at sunset. Within 2 hours, this faint source of light will pass over the horizon, leaving deep night until dawn, a darkness not even the abundant starlight can awaken. I'll walk then alone into the desert, a flashlight to guide the way, all inner light extinguished through a force of will to fit in. I'm at the edge of the desert now. Terrible heat. Awful, really. I've been exposed now for hours. So much has been drained from me. I'm counting the remaining hours now to sunset, anticipating some relief after the sun goes down. I like life this way. I enjoy looking over the awful edge of Oblivion. After 9 months and 4 attempts, I was at last able yesterday to get a San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputy to the desert location where I discovered what I thought were human bones. 3 deputies agreed, and the bones are now on their way to the coroner. Have you ever smelled the odor of a rock? This is something I've only ever experienced in the deep East Mojave Desert, in the low, crumbling ruins of the ancient Bristol and Bullion Mountains, among the island peaks of the Old Dad and Old Woman Mountains, and at the rugged and exposed feet of the Great Providence and Granite Mountains. The smell of stone here can only be detected during the hottest days of summer, and only just after sundown when the faint twilight grows and a swell of gratitude emerges that we've survived another inferno day. The exposed stones here are the ancient product of the collision of continents, white, red, and black in color, rich in silicon and iron. It's the iron which we can seemingly smell. It's the same odor of our own fresh and copious blood, the taste of a bloody nose. Something about the long, hot day and the sudden cessation of heat when the sun goes down appears to draw this same faint odor from the stones, from the landscape itself. It's a beautiful smell while it lasts, strangely familiar, wildly unexpected, as exotic and evocative as a rare perfume. Don't expect this aroma of iron from the forest or the sea or the desert sands. It's a product of barren, exposed, and ancient desert mountains, a factor of deep heat and sudden cooling, and the relief of survival, and the promise of night, and the chance of another day. Look at that wave. Oh my God. That thing is enormous. Is there anybody getting it out there? Oh my God. Oh my God, there's the guy going, oh my God. He dropped off the back. I often like to compare my desert outings to a swim in the sea. In wintertime, a walk into the desert is like a leisurely swim into deep water from a calm and serene shoreline. It isn't until you're very far out that it dawns on you how deep, black, and cold the water below is, and how distant the shimmering shore. In summertime, though, a walk into the desert is like playing in the surf on a day when heavy wind and waves pound upon the shore. There's trepidation from the first step and danger before we're over our heads in apparent depth. Summer is like a storm upon the desert, a raging tempest of heat which drives nearly all life to the cover of shade or to flee altogether until the storm's autumn end. To swim, then, is to risk death in short order, to drown in the heat, to die with bulging eyes and swollen tongue, stumbling and naked towards a shimmering mirage, to become parched and bleached bones upon the sand. The winter desert kills with cold indifference. Its cold daylight silence lures us too far from where we should turn back. The comfort is a vain illusion, just a little further. I'll go just past that ridge. The atmosphere so mild and comforting at mid-afternoon, the sunset coming on. Shall I stop and watch? Nightfall, the onset of sudden, deep cold. Which way back? No lights, no trail, no guide. A final evening, the start of an endless night. That really scares the crap out of me because I've been in both of those situations before and I remember them. Very scary. There was a storm raging all about me during today's hike, invisible for the clear, clean atmosphere, the dead air, and the deceptive desert silence, yet apparent in my beet red face, detectable in the real and rising anxiety of my fast words and the growing delirium evident in my odd topics of conversation and the distracted nature of my discourse with the camera. I'd been exposed in the open sun in temperatures of 110 degrees Fahrenheit or 43 degrees C for over 2 hours, and the heat stress was really beginning to take its toll. I remember thinking, while I walked to hide under a Route 66 bridge, how I was perhaps getting near to someplace bad with regard to my bodily condition, getting close to someplace I shouldn't want to go. Yet curiosity urged me to continue just a little further when I soon left the shelter of the bridge, to inch just a bit nearer the edge of heat stroke and the one-way vista beyond. There's something deeply satisfying about tempting danger in this way. I suspect it's the same feeling others get when they drive very fast or swim with sharks or climb without ropes, a deep invigoration and appreciation of life which comes of a very near miss of life's final and utterly conclusive end. The sudden appearance of the sun is throwing me off. And wow, you can see the ocean so much clearer. There was a guy going out. I wonder if he made it. There's one guy over there. But he's powered in. These two guys are getting hammered. Here, the woman that's coming, she's going to walk past the camera in just a second. She's wearing a red parka. She's a regular out here. She's always barefoot. She walks in from the street barefoot, and she always wears this red parka. And I keep thinking she's maybe a swimmer, but I haven't seen her get in the water. She's going to walk in front of the camera in just a second. I saw her yesterday even too. The season of heat is passing. Temperatures today in the eastern Mojave Desert won't climb past 100 degrees or 38 degrees C until mid-afternoon. A mild day by recent standards. Soon the sun will relent its terrible onslaught of energy upon the land, not by nature of diminished output, but only through the gradual shortening of days and indirect angle of attack. I can already feel the coming change, anticipate the cooler evenings and the crisp bite of midnight cold, which is herald of the much deeper and colder winter nights to come. There isn't much time between seasons here, barely a chance to rest a moment and prepare for the next season's atmosphere and inclination. Spring and autumn are bliss here, though the memory and forecast of what was and what's to come dull all but the most senseless immediate regard. It's interesting how these regulars out here, the woman I just mentioned, there's others too. Dale and the woman with the tent. Age 53, and my mental faculties are both optimally tuned and failing fast. The experience of operating this system is like piloting an airplane through a range of mountains I can't possibly summit. With each passing year of life, the canyons narrow and the valleys rise. There's no going back, and time's running out ahead. I'd better do my thinking now before this journey very soon ends as a smoldering stain upon a high alpine cliff. There is great virtue in self-destruction. By this I do not mean self-harm or injury in any way to our well-being or our innate sense of happiness. In fact, I seek to increase these greatly, to rarefy goodness and find more immediate and sound answers to life's most challenging issues and questions. I do this through destruction, self-destruction to be exact. I attempt this destruction daily, usually in the morning, just before sunrise. I do this by throwing everything of real value upon the fire. Not a scrap of sentiment should remain. I start the fire with the sincere question, are these things true? I then heap on the fuel of criticism, blow the flames with puffs of objectivity, lay on abundant dry honesty, and then watch the new day's inferno rage. What's left in the embers are the little bits of truth I'll carry for another day. For these are my treasures now, not those combustible ideas of dogma, tradition, and authority. I've burned them down again, as I will again tomorrow and the day after that. My secret goal is to one day have nothing left to burn, to be forced to go a day in utter doubt and confusion. Oh, what a blessing to walk in the company of an ignorance hard-earned of education and lost utterly to fearless, naked doubt. I used to be afraid of the desert for impractical reasons. I was afraid of the dark and the solitude and the questions that lurked there. These fears have largely passed. Now I'm afraid of more practical things, like the heat and the cold and the risk of going very far, well, very alone. But also, there's a new and very different fear that's rising. I began to sense it just recently, perhaps truly during this last outing 2 weeks back. It's the sense of a perception of a pathway emerging before me, an invisible route of my own making, a way opening up which I know I'll follow. I don't fear this direction for any reason other than I know that passage is one way and utterly irrevocable. 48 hours till Siberia. I'll arrive half an hour after sunset. It'll be dark then. I'm thinking perhaps I'll leave the motorcycle at the ghost town ruins and night hike immediately after I arrive. Instead of packing the motorcycle with camping gear, I'll prepare my 3-day tactical bag and wear it while riding all the way out to the desert. This is easy to do as I can simply loosen the pack's shoulder straps and allow the bike's pillion seat to carry the pack's full weight. This way, when I arrive, I simply get off the bike, lighten the straps, and start walking into the dark. For this hike, I'll go perhaps a mile north from Siberia into the near edge of the deep water wilderness. This will be my first real overnight in the desert, and away from the reassuring touch of civilization in over 3 decades. A homecoming of sorts. The last time I did a desert night hike like this, I was very young. I remember that night well. I remember emerging from my tent deep in the night to admire the rising moon. I remember the warm, empty promise of the desert night wind. I remember feeling so small and frail, standing naked and barefoot on the sand in the vast and empty night, the great dark desert illuminated with faint pale moonlight, the only man on earth it seemed. It's possible my nihilism can be traced to this moment, or moments like this. There were many then. I wonder how my much older mind will react to this same experience 48 hours from now. Things are very different now. I'm a family man now. I have solid life objectives now. I have sound principles now. I have deeply meaningful purpose now. I know and recognize the great indifference now. I don't fear the empty. Death is a wondrous, perhaps utterly final mystery to me now. I no longer pretend I've outthought death's. I no longer pretend I've outthought death's mystery, and I no longer pledge allegiance to any comforting story of forever. I now instead await and welcome whatever strange, wondrous, or terrible reality really awaits. I think I'm ready for whatever I'll now find or not find in the night. There's always lightning here during the summer, at night in Siberia, in the east and in the north. Ever seen, never heard. There was an enormous dust storm racing across the desert towards me. I was scrambling to set up and secure my tent before the storm arrived. The initial winds were intense, nearly knocking the tent flat before blotting out the remaining sun and ushering in the start of a long, hot, gritty night. The dust storm hit my desert camp before I could finish pounding in the last tent stakes, flapping the loose tent madly while minute particles of dust began clouding the sun and irritating my eyes. The wind blew hard for several hours at the start of night, while I alternated resting and walking about the dark camp. It was too hot to remain in the tent, too windy to cook a meal or relax, too soon for sleep. Gosh, I remember this night so well. And I remember that storm. The wind eventually stopped, the dust passed or settled into the dark, the stars came out. Still too hot to sleep well. I bound the tent flaps open to invite in the night breeze. Still too hot to sleep well. I bound the tent flaps open to invite in the night breeze, as well as scorpions, tarantulas, and snakes. I lay naked upon the floor of the tent, nothing to sleep on or covering me, just the soft, hot sand below and the dehydrating hot wind above, blowing heat all about and over every inch of my body. I slept then. Not well, not deep. Night thoughts rose in my mind between dream and consciousness. I tended these like a small, fragile flame when I could, when my mind rose far enough from sleep to realize I was thinking. I let all those quiet night thoughts go. I can't remember a one now. they were ghosts in the night. I'm awake now. It's another hour before dawn. The morning wind woke me with a long and sudden blast of heat. I expect this is how the desert anticipates the summer day to come, an anxiety of mindless natural force. The desert around me is so dark and empty, only the wind my companion, and the stars a distant mute audience. This night I'll remember always, a fitting candidate for the someday smile on an old man's face, my grandchildren wondering, why does Grandpa smile that way? That is, I've noticed that of myself, that is coming about. Sweat and life evaporate equally well out here. The lull and comfort of civilization and companionship dull my perception of life's immediate passing. The tick-tick of seconds we'll never get back. Don't think such thoughts. Here, amuse yourself with the TV, or watch a movie. How about a meal, or a drink, or a chat with friends? There's no such distraction out here. Just the locomotive's determined passing, blind to anything other than their rails. I can't help sense time's passage here. Feel the very real weight of age. My muscles seem to fade with each step. That distant peak, possible yesterday, impossible today, not even a dream tomorrow. Each moment, less and less. It didn't escape my notice that the desert dust storm I encountered 2 nights back encompassed the deep water wilderness. Before the wind and sand swallowed me up where I camped on the gentle sloping alluvial plain near Siberia. I watched as the storm front passed quickly across the edge of deep water, 1 mile to the north of my camp. This means the dust storm swept up and through, first the twisting red canyons of deep water, and then along the craggy black volcanic mountains leading to the heart of the desolate Bristol Range. From within those mountains, someone would never see such a storm approaching. The experience of such a sandstorm within the mountains would be both sudden and overwhelming. Immediately prior, the air would be still, the sky would be clear, the desert as silent as always, and then suddenly a brown wall and wave of wind would appear over the ridge and up the canyon. Anyone walking or setting up camp there would be consumed in seconds by wind and sand, left standing or hunkering against the sandblast gale. Eyes covered by hands, mouth tight, mind racing. And as these storms often come at twilight, the person caught so exposed would also be subject to sudden nightfall as the sand snuffs out the setting sun, ushering a long, harsh twilight. I wonder how often the desert explorers and miners of old encountered such storms. The only story I've read of such an event relates the 100-year-old tale of an old miner who was caught suddenly by a sandstorm in the same general area where I was camping 2 nights back. In fact, he was a few miles southeast at the edge of the Amboy crater lava field, attempting the long walk from Baghdad to 29 Palms, where he would attempt to sell various items he collected from the mines. He was an old man and got by any way he could. I suspect the sandstorm he met rose up from the same dry lake bed where my storm was born. The miner was overwhelmed by the storm, just as I was, and sought shelter in a lava tube while I found refuge in a tent. While waiting out the wind and sand, he discovered large chunks of gold in the lava. The story goes that he took enough gold to fill a Bull Durham bag, with plans to return for the rest. Sadly, the old miner was dead within 24 hours of his return to Baghdad, and the gold he bought back was used to pay for his funeral expenses. I expect the sandstorms have been a feature of the desert here for tens of thousands of years. Now that I know of them, and I know what to look for and expect, I'll anticipate the day I'm once again suddenly enveloped in a long, blustery, gritty night of blowing sand and howling wind. I'll relish the chance and prepare my mind for the opportunity. 4 weeks back, and my overnight at Siberia was a brutal affair. The ground, which had absorbed a great deal of energy from sunlight, which had then radiated into the cooling night air from sundown until well past midnight. Sleep was then very difficult, Sleep was very difficult then, as sweat pooled on the bottom of my tent, and I tossed and turned until 3 a.m. I arose at dawn, thoroughly dehydrated and fully sapped of all energy. The prospect of facing sunrise and the broiling day to come was daunting then, and I hastily broke camp in favor of a full retreat to my cool and comfortable home on the coast. 2 weeks later, on August 11th, and the story was different. Temperatures were 5 degrees cooler, and the earth was losing its collected daylight heat fast after sundown. This was due to an unexpected sandstorm which rose suddenly at dusk, with winds that seemingly drained the earth of heat before the long summer twilight was complete. I slept better then, save for the clamor of the wind rattling my tent and the grit of sand blowing in through open flaps, as well as the bite of some desert creepy-crawly which clambered into bed with me from the dark. When I awoke the next day at dawn, the planet was in halcyon spirits, and I wondered if summer had somehow gone. The air temperature was cool and the atmosphere refreshingly clear after the long night of blowing sand. I stepped out of my tent into the pale light beneath a still ebony sky. The stars were gone in anticipation of the dawn. Day and night hung then in perfect balance. My fear of the desert was gone then, too. I even contemplated the 1-mile hike to the edge of deep water. The desert had fooled me. Not deliberately, of course. There's far too much indifference here to support any malice. I was fooled by circumstance and the natural confluence of events and the quality and character of that particular morning's climate and my own foolish trust of a clockwork universe of ever-descending consequence. I was slow to break camp then. I lured myself to complicit peace and a quiet and settled attitude. Suddenly the heat returned with force. It was about 30 minutes after those beams first touched my skin after sunlight spilled over the Bristol Mountains. I felt my internal temperature begin to rise, rising faster than sweat could control. Besides, I was thoroughly dehydrated from the dry night wind. There wasn't enough moisture in me to mount an effective thermal defense. I was losing the battle even before it really began. A little panic then, a little haste. I broke camp quickly, and I was on my motorcycle and moving along Route 66 in no time. That felt good. I was keeping the rising desert heat at bay, through the wind of my bike, and the false sense of safety that our contraptions sometimes provide. I remember that thought. I stopped the bike once to admire a distant bahia, and another time to cast a melancholy gaze at the nothing that was once the ghost town of Baghdad. Neither time did I get off the bike. Neither time did I stop the engine. Too much risk in either action. Just keep moving. Forget about the heat. About 10 miles from my camp at Siberia, I saw the low black profile of the volcanic cinder cone called Amboy Crater, and my route began taking me past the crater's miles of hardened black lava. This is a particularly hot place, hotter than the surrounding desert. This is due to the black rocks, which absorb heat to such an extent that you cannot touch them with your bare skin, and which radiate this heat all day and night in great waves upon the land. This area is one of the origin places for the great winds which drive the sandstorms here, an origin place for many indifferent desert things. On a whim, I decided to pull into Amboy Crater at the Bureau of Land Management's narrow one-lane paved road leading into the National Monument. I knew there were covered picnic tables by the trailhead, which is the start of a 2-mile walk to the crater summit. I thought I'd rest a bit in the shade, ready myself for the long 200-mile ride back home to the coast. I woke an hour later to utter silence, the same midsummer daytime silence which speaks such volumes in the desert. There was nobody around when I had arrived. Nobody came while I lay naked on the concrete in the shade. Well, I wasn't completely naked. Ants clambering over my body, displaying the same open indifference I knew so well here. I sat up and rubbed my eyes, which squinted bloodshot and red, still stinging from the night's blowing sand. Why do I do this? I asked myself. Why do I come to such places? No answer was needed. The silence was answer enough. I didn't think anything more, though I did write a short bit of prose then. I've copied it below. It's about the heat and the cold, The twin killers, as I called them. Here's what I wrote. There's an invisible killer prowling the entirety of the desert, on a schedule both predictable and unposted. It swallows everyone and everything at once, and begins squeezing until we're either dead or its time for departure has come. It will come again tomorrow, a little sooner or later, depending on the season. It disappears for some months while its less dangerous fraternal twin takes its station. There's a short season of overlap, when both killers can be met on the same day, though never at the same hour. Remember that these killers cannot be seen, are soundless, have no mind, and are utterly without mercy. 6 hours later I was home, safe with my wife and daughter, enjoying a long, cool swim in the pool. 24 hours after I left Amboy Crater, a husband and wife from Los Angeles drove into the same empty parking lot. I'm sure nobody else was there. They probably parked their car in the same spot where I'd parked my motorcycle, which was the most convenient location to the lot, close to both the shelter and the covered picnic benches and the trailhead. At around 11 a.m., the couple set out for the crater. By 2 p.m., both were dead. Excuse me. Forgot that you can hear me way over here. One reason few people remain in the desert very long is the dawning awareness that rises here that no legacy or memory can stay intact in such a hostile and dangerous place. Everything dies in the desert. Everything fades to dust and sand. Nothing remains or returns like it was before. Elsewhere, in more mild climes, the fact of our growing and extended circle of family and friends, and the seeming permanence of what we've made or done in our lives, lead us to believe that the results of our life effort will last and maybe even survive for a while beyond our own passing. We imagine our life's work will stand for a time as a humble monument to our brief existence here. We are comforted we won't soon be forgotten, that after death our name won't quickly become disconnect from the individual we once were. That anonymity will not sweep over us as it does every man and every woman and every child who was and who no longer is. That we won't at last become nothing more than a faded name scratched along with some dates onto cut stones in a graveyard or forgotten someone's. Old age and death are less fearful then, as we fooled ourselves that our works will last for a while upon the earth, while our spirit will then go on to exist forever in heaven or hell. Such a curious equanimity, such a deceitful peace. Deserts offer no such peace. Deserts remind us that we are sand and wind and heat, animate for a while, alive for just another day. They inform us we have no soul. They tell us that death is no more than a return to the nothing we were so long before life. And deserts say these things without words, speaking facts through mute and stark example, caring not if we listen or comprehend, incapable of carrying even emptiness their first and final word. This is why few who come remain long in the desert. This is why we come and then so quickly go. There's only so much we can take of such a place, only so much we can stand before we run back to our loved ones. Return to those who share our myths and stories and tales and promise of comfort, permanence, and peace. To tell ourselves that what we began to suspect out in the desert isn't really true. To hold our hands to our ears. Oh, right. That's what they're doing. Our people are doing. They're to tell ourselves that what we began to suspect out in the desert isn't really true. To hold our hands to our ears and close our eyes, to speak reassuring words of forever, to talk a final reunion and final reconciliation and final justice, to speak again of forever and then again, to talk of someday mansions in the clouds and a just lawgiver who will love us forever and of joy to last for eternity. Good gosh, that's exactly what I wanted to write then. We leave the desert to escape the denial of such comfort. We leave the desert to forget the sand, to forget the silence and the heat and the empty and the utter indifference of a universe that truly does not seem to care, and the awesome implication these discovered facts suggest may be true. Yeah, that's exactly the takeaway of that desert experience. Jeez Louise, every time I look over, there's somebody getting an incredible ride. Tonight will be the first evening in Siberia this summer when the temperatures at sunset will already be below 100 degrees. Wait, I missed one. The peaceful corridors of the mind. I'll walk there now and again later, from time to time, so quiet, more silent even than the desert at night, not even the sound of crickets. Now we resume. Tonight will be the first evening in Siberia this summer when the temperatures at sunset will already be below 100 degrees, 38 C. I want to be there then. I want to walk alone towards the darkening desert mountains then. I want to watch while the killer makes its evening retreat to the east. I haven't yet made a long nighttime excursion and overnight into the deep water near my ghost town home of Siberia. My reason is the fearful summertime heat which returns so soon after sunrise, and my knowing reluctance to wake in the morning far from the feigned safety of my motorcycle, and the necessity of hiking so far back while the desert killer begins stalking in from the east. Twice in the past, the killer nearly got me. Once 2 years back, another time 3 decades before that, when I was young, strong, and in a very real danger to myself. The last time the desert almost caught me, I had foolishly lingered too long in the vicinity of deep water and was nearly taken as I attempted a hasty and somewhat panicked escape across and over a barren landscape of slippery, decomposed granite. As I jogged along and through the craggy, rolling landscape, I worried that the loose rock would twist an ankle and leave me crippled and exposed to the coming killer. That experience was foolish, and the fear that I felt then was very real and well earned. I almost think I spotted death moving towards me, then rather near from the north, from the deep end of the desert sea, wavering and flickering in the dry heat haze, a terrible mirage caught up in my panicked breathing, drawn to my hot pounding pulse. Before that, many decades before, I had left my little red truck by the road in the late summer morning in the Panamint Valley, on a late summer morning in the Panamint Valley, without water or a hat or any protection at all, and I'd decided to hike to a distant sand dune, so far, yet apparently so near. I turned back too late, perhaps 20 minutes too late, having failed my goal. I was very frustrated and so very stupid. I was nearly dead when I reached my truck again. My face was ghastly red, my body in the full riot of heat stroke. I later estimated I had probably less than 30 minutes of life left in me then. The killer had been directly on my heels, though I had no way of knowing him at that young age. I was then quite blind and immortal. It took several hours for my strong, healthy body to recover that day. It's been decades since, and my mind has still not recovered the experience. Has still not overcome the experience. Now I'm like a boy stung badly by bees who can't help returning to the hive. I gaze at the desert from a distance. I venture close when I can. I walk towards deep water where the threat is real. I always turn back before the killer spots me. I know I'm playing chicken with a force which will not flinch. I cannot let myself meet the killer again. I can't afford even to get close. I have far too much joy in life to risk fruitless death. I have proud responsibilities I both recognize and gladly own. I have my people and loved ones who count on me, and I have these strange words I do dearly love to write and share. Yet I will go out again and tempt the killer. I'll watch it move across the desert at dawn, to storm and rage all day and then pass away as the sun goes down. I'll watch, but I will not attempt, and I will remember always that the killer will never know me. Even if it sees me, even if it kills me, even if I someday blunder and stumble into its path, it will never, ever know me. It's interesting to note how the fearful things of my ordinary life refuse to accompany or follow me into the desert. Worries about money, career, or reputation drop away as I ride my motorcycle into the wastes. It's as though these things can find no purchase or footing in a place where their concerns have no relevance, or perhaps it's simply because these worries become mean and petty in the face of the more real and permanent truth I encounter in their stead. Like the rich man who spills coins from his hand when he looks up to find the executioner at the door, or the businessman who abandons all and runs ahead of an approaching plague, or the well-known figure who chooses loved ones over adulation while lying upon his deathbed. The curious thing is the way these effects linger after my return. How I can walk like Caesar for days among my petty, civilized fears, looking down my nose at vanity, propriety, and esteem, respecting only love and goodness and virtue. I return always from the desert, haunted and empowered by a grave truth I can only know by going deeper and further than I'd like, by going past the limit of the more common sense, by rejecting my base mortal fear, and by always going alone. There are several ways to become lost in a desert. Only the most fortunate are never found. Even if they return to community, home, and loved ones, they are never found. Even if they live long and to a ripe old age, they are never found. Even if a subtle smile graces their countenance for the rest of their lives, they are never found. Their blessing is being never found. Their great secret is being lost. Their humble wisdom is knowing no way back. The following words are a confession of my selfish past and present, as well as a statement of my ongoing effort at improvement. I note these things for the benefit of my daughter and her children, should they somehow inherit my want of going alone. I'd be lying if I said my path isn't scary. It is. The going alone theme isn't hyperbole. It's the perfect signpost on the faint trail where I prefer to walk, and the name of a destination I'll never reach. However, this route isn't nearly as solitary as it once was, as there are now some improved oases of human connection along the way, some better opportunity for time apart from the nowhere road to no place special. I'm no longer as alone as I once was. I have my wife and my daughter and my brother and my mom. Granted, I've always had these, though now I have them better than ever. And they have me, for better or for worse, and we've each other now, and more than ever before. Sadly, though, the rest have fallen away, or rather, I've let them all go. It's a rather mean and callous thing, to be sure, but so too would be the artificial maintenance of connections I no longer want or need or desire to keep. I suspect that if I'm not capable of being a very good friend, then it's probably best to not be one at all. I do enjoy this quiet life. My strong, abiding preference has always been to be alone. I prefer the solitary company of my steps and thoughts. I prefer the empty landscape and long solitude of nights and days without others. I appreciate having no one to console or reassure me when I'm afraid of what's true. And I desperately want no one to distract me from the awful indifference which looms now across the horizon of my mind and gapes like a cold void at the frontier of my every solitary adventure. I'm lucky to have my wife, 30 years together, and she knows my journey. I have a partner who both allows and encourages this path I'm on. In the past, this going alone route sometimes drew me far away from her. Those were lonely times for us both. For me, the fact of being someone who was lost. For her, the fact of being married to someone lost, and the consequence of married solitude. The last decade saw gradual improvement through the natural process of hard-won maturity and the persistence of commitments to the values my wife and I both share, and which we attempt to instill in our daughter through both lesson and example. The key change was our 14 months apart. That time when I came to America first and left my wife and daughter behind in Japan. That experience broke me. Thankfully, I was broken then. And after we were reunited, I was a new man. I understood better the value of my human contacts, especially my family. I gave up going alone then, and for 2 years I focused on becoming a better husband and father, a better man. I think I succeeded. The improved quality of our lives is testament to this change, as well as the patience of my family as well as the patience of my family in waiting for me to catch up to values they already knew. But I knew I hadn't really changed. I just knew better what was most important. I know that I can never fully get off the path of going alone, and with this realization I gave up my friends, I gave up my connections, I abandoned social media and email and reduced my online footprint to a single blog and an occasional video. I found a good balance, a disconnected balance, disconnected from all but my most intimate connections, my wife, my daughter, my brother, and my mom. And just for pause, that was the period when I was really writing the book, disconnected like that. Now I go alone again, every 2 weeks on a Friday. I literally go alone then. I go off to the desert and disconnect for a full 24 hours. I then return and reconnect. I reconnect with my wife and my daughter and my brother and my mom. There's little to no connection with anyone else. My wife and I talk about this sometimes. She smiles and tells me she's lost her interest in other connections too. Perhaps this is a factor of our shared age. Or maybe it's because, though we are very different, we've nevertheless shared the same road together for most of our lives. My wife and I spend far more and better time together now. We often smile at one another and hold hands like when we were dating, and we go places together and we walk and we talk and we laugh like we once did. We just want each other now, and our daughter and our brothers and sister and our mother and father and our little dog and our little home, our safe little corner of the universe. It's a place where the great indifference can only peek in through the window from the cold and dark outside. That is, if it had any interest or ability to do so. It has no place here, now. It's a place out there where nothing, it cares. That's how I really did come back from the desert. I sometimes look out our window on a peaceful and happy Sunday night with the family, and I wonder at the dead indifference stalking the night out there in the dark, the dead indifference which never was alive and never died. Still, this path scares me, for though I'm not fully alone, I know that I am alone. I found the great indifference early in life, and now I'm so far along there's no chance of turning back. Though even if I could, I'd never turn back. For how can reason rightly turn away from what it knows is true? This path brings me closer each day to a once distant horizon growing near. It's a place I neither fear nor want. I can't turn back. And though I can't turn back, I know the remaining journey is secure with the ones I love, secure until the moment we pass away forever from one another, with no chance of final reunion, no chance of final reconciliation, and no chance of final justice. I must attend to these things in the here and now. I must recognize and stand up to my fears now. No more cowardly hiding from this life through my time in the wastes. No more cowardly hiding from the wastes through my fear of what was never here. There. Stumbled a bit at the end of that one. I'm looking north from the edge of the desert ghost town of Siberia. I'm standing at the edge of the deep water wilderness, which extends into the horizon. At left is Black Mesa, a place I haven't yet reached. At center is the heart of deep water, an intimidating badlands and maze-like moonscape of decomposed granite flash-flood channels and gullies. At right can be seen the distant and hazy silhouette of the old Dad Mountains and the much near unnamed black volcano I visited last winter, where I discovered the remains of Campo No. 1. So I want to strike out now into this wilderness. It's a place where humans seemingly never go, at least not since the 19th century gold miners gave up and left. I'd go out there now if I didn't know the killer was already on its way and ready to meet me. Instead, I'll head back to my motorcycle now. I'll escape while I still can. Already the temperature has risen drastically since sunrise, or maybe that's just my fear. Either way, it's a good time to get away. My GSA motorcycle is parked and ready to go. It's a shame to leave though, just as my imagination, this is a separate section, I didn't do a good pause between that. My GSA motorcycle is packed and ready to go. It's a shame to leave though, just as my imagination and thinking were acclimating to the silence and solitude, but that's all right, as bits of this place always follow me home, adding incrementally to the joy and meaning of a well-lived life. In Japan, the landscapes I explored appeared new and young, almost adolescent. with steep and rugged mountains rising direct from the sea and long, narrow valleys twisting into impossibly remote, mist-covered peaks. Everywhere the rocks were jagged and angular, as though freshly fallen from cliffs and peaks. The mountains of Japan also soar and tinkle, always with the sound of flowing water, unbelievable quantities of clean, fresh, and cold water melting from snowy Alps, percolating from saturated mountain soils, and raging through wild streams and rivers, which rise and swell with abundant rainfall in the torrent of seasonal typhoons. The landscape has the character of youth, being bold, brash, and full of life, and abundant energy. I was always in awe of the wilderness in Japan, though the effect was sometimes somewhat superficial, like the experience of watching a skilled athlete in control of a young and powerful body, or the impetuous activity of youth, newly animated with the spirit of discovering they are alive. These things are impressive, though not often moving. The American desert is very different. My time alone in wild places here is like a stroll through a through a mausoleum of geology. The mountains are ancient and worn, the greater part of their being having been reduced to the sand beneath my feet. The rocks are angular, like the rocks in Japan, though in the desert they stay this way for eons, there being little rain to capture, move, or grind their way through and grind away the rough edges. The water that does come is powerful, yet brief and fleeting, like the smile of an old man remembering the joy of youth while the reaper places its hand upon his shoulder. And the desert is quiet and silent and at peace. The desert always has my respect, and at times moves me like a great teacher or quiet sage, though I know it is neither. I'm glad I've known both landscapes. I'm grateful for the character lesson of each, as well as the example of good living they provide through two quite distinct and different seasons of life. I realize now that my repeated visits to Siberia have left an imprint there which I neither intended nor wanted. My brief living at that spot has marked it with my passage and added something to the mystery of that place. I always set up my camp at Siberia in the same spot. It's an area both convenient to my motorcycle and slightly protected from the desert's prevailing east wind. The sand beneath where I place my tent has become soft due to my removal of all but the smallest stones, and the four corners where I pound my tent stakes are clearly marked with the large stones I use to secure these into the ground. Finally, there's a small section of cut wooden railroad tie with a small metal grate secured to the top. This item is stuck into the sand just outside the rectangle of stones. I found this item in the desert some months back and brought it to the camp to serve as my cook table. This is my camp at the desert ghost town of Siberia. It's a rough place of stone, sand, wood, and steel, yet its origin of human hands is clear. It's an artifact of human caring. The effect of these symmetrically placed stones surrounding an area of fine sand and accented with a wood and metal grate suggests human intervention. It's the same thing I experience now when I encounter old graves in the desert, or when I first discovered that stone-lined footpath through the middle of Siberia. These things tell us someone's been here. They suggest someone once cared in a place where caring has long since departed. My contribution to the mystery of Siberia is a rectangular perimeter of rock surrounded by a bed of soft sand and an accent of wood and metal. I realize now that even if I never go back to Siberia, my fingerprints are there. My mark on that place is secure. I've added yet another strange human assembly of objects to that place. I've produced yet another mystery of stone and debris, something to perhaps catch and puzzle the mind of anyone who visits and looks closely today, tomorrow, or 100 years from now. In fact, what I'm describing right there can be seen by satellite. If you go into Google Earth and look down at Siberia, you can see what I just described there. So I guess it is permanent in a way. The young man I once was would never join me in the desert. He'd know better than to not go alone. He'd make up some polite excuse to tell me no before giving me the social slip. I'd be proud of his foresight then, even if I knew he didn't understand the reason he must go alone. My young self would be such a burden in the desert, so lost and searching and full of energy, questions, pointless speculations. Whoop. Looks like I'm almost out of battery. I better go quick. I'm glad I wasn't there when I was that young man. I'd never invite my younger self to the desert with me. I'd do him the small favor at least. Otherwise, I'd be perfectly silent with him. I wouldn't tell him a single thing. I might not make it to the end of this chapter. I'm about to run out of battery. Good gosh, this is a long chapter. I'm down to the last 10%. I won't make it. No. Okay, well, maybe I better stop there. I still have like 8 pages to go, and I'm down to the last 10% of battery, so I think I'll stop here. Darn it. How am I going to get through it in the future? Anyway, thanks for joining me. Let's see if there's any comments before I sign off. I don't understand. There's too many chat options here. Sam says, thank you, Kurt. I always enjoy joining your streams whenever I'm able. Have a wonderful day. You too. Take care. All right, well, that's it for me. I'm going to sign off for now. Here from well, here, let's take a look real quick. I'll use the last bit of power to show you what this looks like here. And with that, I think I'll sign off for today. Thanks for joining me for this book reading. I'm sorry I couldn't make it to the end of this chapter. I'll be a little more careful next time I do this chapter and be a little more cautious and temperate with my time. Take care. Have a great day. Be safe, but not too safe.